you're outside and hearing me, we are asking that you come inside. Dr. Newsom, the minister. Dr. Prince. We have She's very expectant in the air. Thank you so much. Good morning again, and welcome to UTech. Welcome to our shared facilities, LT50, to the second day of our International Climate Change Conference with the theme, Adaptation and Mitigation Strategies for Climate Departure, Managing the Crisis. We had multiple very interesting presentations yesterday, and a couple of them underscored why we are using the term climate departure and highlighting that we really do need to come together to strategize so that we can mitigate the effects of climate change, climate departure, and that we can become more resilient as a nation, as a region, as a small island developing state. My name is Garfield Young. Your program says Dr. Lawrence Newville. This is not he, but I'm filling in for him. The Honorable Matthew Samuda, MP, Senator Mrs. Sophia Fraser-Binns, Opposition Spokesperson on Environment and Ecological Heritage, Ms. Jennifer Baldwin, Director, Office of Environment and Health, USAID, Jamaica. Conference Chair, Dr. Glendon Newsom. Sponsors, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning again. We are off to a late start, but we are getting into the opening session for day 2, and we are very pleased to have a number of individuals who will address us, and then we will hear from 3 of our sponsors, and then we'll move into our plenary session that we will have presenting Miss Uname Gordon, Dr. Teresa Rodriguez Moody, the British High Commissioner to Jamaica, Judith Slater, and a representative from the Overseas Development Institute. So welcome again, and because we are late, we will not delay any further. I'm going to invite and thank the Honorable Matthew Samuda for agreeing to be here. Yesterday we had our Prime Minister as the keynote speaker, and if you missed it, our YouTube channel has it, and it's also on the JIS channel. So we invite you to have a look, and even if you were here, perhaps to re-look, re-listen at some very important things that were said by our keynote speaker and by others. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the podium for the opening address, the Honorable Matthew Samuda, MP.
Good morning, and thank you for your warm welcome. Allow me to acknowledge all of your guests, your panelists, your participants are all experts in their own right, and certainly will contribute to a very important forum. I assure guests that though UTech is known for practical education, that the warmth of the room is not to practically demonstrate climate departure. Climate change is an interesting phenomenon and an interesting discussion, Senator Fraser-Binns. It's one that we've had many an exchange related to. But I think we'd all agree that we are living the impacts and effects of a climate which has changed, of weather patterns which have shifted. The fundamental question, which I'm admittedly not able to answer, but we expect scientists to answer soon, is whether or not we've already passed the point of climate departure. And I would imagine that yesterday most presenters would have been at pains to describe and explain exactly what that means. But for a small island developing state, a developing country, a country with structural deficiencies such as Jamaica, that is a calamity in any category in which you wish to examine it. It is a calamity because the handicaps handed down to us by former colonial masters, the mistakes made which have caused generational economic impact, and our own growth history creates deficiencies that makes it very difficult for economies and countries of our size to respond. Now, because we only have 10 minutes, and I looked very carefully at the subject that you asked us to address, I'll be very direct and focus most of my attention on the issue of adaptation. But I think it is important to not ignore the importance of our mitigation efforts, but to understand contextually that there is an economic model that allows for them to happen without positioning ourselves as a victim. The first thing to contemplate is what is mitigation and what does that mean for us as what's classified as a dark country, one that doesn't use a lot of electricity, quite frankly, and why we need to mitigate when in absolute terms, per capita terms, we're simply not the greatest polluters that cause this problem. Well, it's firstly because we're a moral people and we agree that if we're calling for something, we also need to lead the way. But practically, there's an economic model that allows for us and demands that we mitigate against expensive pollution-causing energy usage. We are at 42 cents a kilowatt hour. Partially our own fault, partially other factors. But we are at 42 cents a kilowatt hour. That allows us to hit our mitigation targets because the economic model of electricity at 42 cents a kilowatt hour allows investors through PPPs, which the government is working very hard at, has a new green investment strategy, has a new PPP strategies working with the World Bank through the IFC on a series of PPPs. It allows you the space to create investment opportunities for the private sector to come in and build much cleaner, greener energy production sources. It allows for PPPs even in public transportation, which we're already exploring, and I think it allows for significant investment in areas such as the National Water Commission, in energy efficient solutions as your largest consumer of energy, because it's so expensive currently. So persons are able to invest and create very good ROE or ROI on much leaner, greener, cheaper alternatives that allow Jamaica to hit its targets by 2030. I'll share with you two. The first is we await the final license from the OUR for the implementation of a 100-acre solar farm floating on the Mona Reservoir, which will generate 45 megawatts of clean energy. We expect that to happen in the coming months. That's a project that doesn't use government resources. That's not us, in many ways, cowering and begging the multilaterals and our bilateral partners for investment. There's an economic model that allows an investor to come in, save the country significant money, doesn't take up our capital space, while allowing them to make sufficient return on their investment. That's just one of a number of options that we have. You should be aware that the government has also gone to market for 100 megawatts of clean energy. This will not come from Jamaican tax dollar investment. So there are several such examples that show the route to the NDCs being achieved, being our nationally determined contributions. So I'm not doubtful, despite some delays that we've had over the last 4 to 5 years, that our mitigation targets under our NDCs are indeed in reach. I'm not doubtful that these mitigation targets will allow us to have the moral authority to speak as forcefully as former Prime Minister Simpson Miller would have, as current Prime Minister Holness would have, as former principal director of the Climate Change Division would have in her many years of service. Jamaica has always had a very strong voice in this space, and this economic benefit will also allow us to maintain our strong voice in a space where requires strong voices to get action from those who do pollute. So that's the mitigation side of things. The adaptation side is a little more scary, because you see storms that persons debate should be category 6, hitting places that they wouldn't normally hit. You see storms hitting us at times of the year with forces that they wouldn't normally appear. You see longer, drier, hotter droughts that have a disastrous implication for our agriculture, for our way of life. And you can go on, you're seeing saltwater intrusion here, you're losing coastline. You're seeing the impact day in, day out in every facet of your life. Not just sweating in a lecture theater, you're seeing it with higher water bills, you're seeing it with higher transportation costs, you're seeing it with food unavailability, you're seeing it with food costs. We are living the impacts and require significant action to allow for the space for adaptation. And the biggest discussion that has to happen, and why it's good when you have stakeholders like this in the room, is not because the government isn't moving apace to complete its national adaptation plan, not because it's not honoring its commitments for its strategic planning under the Paris Agreement, not because Jamaica wasn't the first to complete what's called a Jamaica Systemic Risk Assessment tool, which forces you to look at infrastructure development through the climate lens. But because you're such a small economy that in many ways has just, or is nearing completion of its macroeconomic recovery, with great microeconomic needs, the discussion has to happen in a manner where the common man understands that the cost of adaptation will slow some of our personal and community ambitions, because roads have to be built at a different standard, because houses have to be built at a different standard, lecture theaters have to be built at a different standard, because you have to be able to, in an earthquake belt, withstand earthquakes, withstand category 6 storms, while keeping cool so that your electricity costs aren't through the roof. It's a challenge, so it means instead of building 30,000 homes, to build them at the standard, you may need to build 12. Just for argument's sake, we allow the experts at UTech to tell us of the new technologies that allow us to adapt. But it means that we have to look at our agriculture very differently. And our agricultural structure as an economy is well known to have its deficiencies. and is not well placed for what the world or what scientists tell us we need to do to adapt. So we have a number of challenges with adaptation, and greatest amongst those is societal understanding, so that it doesn't descend into the usual political backing and forthing. You won't always have the luxury of opposition spokesperson and former minister agreeing on most strategies that need to take place in that regard. You won't always have that luxury in the political environment in this country or any other. But you do have a significant gap in understanding from the majority of the electorate of what is required for us to adapt to something that we didn't cause, that we don't deserve, but is a reality and is on our doorstep. The other real reality is this unfortunate concept, and I'm going to take one more minute, of climate additionality that your multilaterals require you to show. Not realizing that the climate additionality that they require you to show to access some of the funds that you require for your adaptation plans is sufficient to destroy you while you wait on them to accept that there's sufficient climate additionality, especially in markets or countries where the ability to assess climate attribution is so limited. So we have challenges, and greatest among them all, I believe, is the adaptation. I see a path with some understanding, with some legislative change, with a little bit more welcoming an environment to PPPs. There's a clear path to surpassing your mitigation targets. There is clear danger to achieving your adaptation targets because of our fiscal space, our political culture, and because of the broken multilateral system that we need so desperately. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samuda. Really demonstrating that you are very aware of the challenges we face brought on by climate change. Thank you for sharing on mitigation strategies, and we are heartened to know that the government still sees the 2030 targets for mitigation as possible. So that's very heartening. And we also are aware that adaptation strategies are not the easiest to deal with, but that's why we're here to discuss how we can together come up with the right strategies so that we can adapt to the changes that we are all experiencing. Thank you very much, Mr. Samuda. I'm going to now invite to the podium Senator Mrs. Sophia Fraser-Binns, who is the opposition spokesperson for the environment. And I think, Mrs. Fraser-Binns, that you do have Senate today? I do. Right. So we won't delay you much further. Please welcome her to the podium.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Young. Prof, good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Former Minister, Miss Jennifer Baldwin, and I see my dear friend Uname in the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And my time hasn't started as yet, because my 10 minutes started with my presentation, but I have to tell you good morning, right? All right, so my 10 minutes don't start, and I want my 10 minutes because I want to talk to you about some very serious things. But I'm pleased to be here, and I want to congratulate UTEC on this conference. Time come, Minister Samuda, for a conference just as this that is grounded in research and data-driven. You can start my 10 minutes now. I'm very happy that Minister Samuda spent some time to speak about the effects of climate change, because I'm not going to be talking about the effects of climate change this morning. I want to talk about something that we have not been speaking about, but we must start speaking about. And it has to do with climate change and how it affects housing and the insurance market. A matter that is not spoken about, but I think time comes for us to start the conversation, UTEC, and I'm challenging you, Prof, to commence that conversation. Now, for small island states like Jamaica, we know that we are characterized by increased beach erosions because of climate change, and we see this, for example, in Hellshire. And we also know, as the minister mentioned, that one of the things that we are characterized by is unsafe housing stock as seawater continues to creep ever so close to our homes. And these two things have a direct effect on housing and affordable and accessible insurance. There is a company, Grant Thornton, and this is what they say. They say that climate change poses a systemic risk to insurance. And we all know about Swiss Re, the world, one of the leading international reinsurers. And you will allow me to quote what they say, because what they said is that extreme weather events have led to increased losses of about $105 billion in 2021, which is the fourth highest since 1970. And the effect of this is that the rate of insurance will continue to rise steadily year over year. Recognizing the significant effect that climate change has on insurance, the experts in a March 1, 24 article called it insurance catastrophe. And I'm going to quote a paragraph, which I think is important for our discourse here. It says, the ripple effects of extreme weather events brought on by an unfolding climate crisis, will be an increase in premiums for some homeowners, while others are expected to be priced out of the catastrophe insurance coverage. This, ladies and gentlemen, is expected to trigger significant reduction in insurance coverage for Jamaican homeowners. So the question we must ask ourselves, how then is this affecting us? And we have the socioeconomic effect. And one of the effects is seen in the construction sector. Why is this? The fact is that, based on our preliminary studies, over 60% of homes are purchased by mortgage. And in order to get a mortgage, you have to have insurance. But when premiums are so high that it is unaffordable, it means, therefore, that less people will be purchasing homes. When less people purchase homes, it means that the construction sector, which contributes between 3 to 5% to GDP, will slow down. A slowdown in this sector has implication for employment. It has implication for the environment. But it also has implication for the very social fabric of the society. Because when you have our young males who comprise the majority of the employees on our construction sites being unemployed, then we really just leave them there to get involved in unseemly activities which can lead to crime and violence. And this is something that we have to consider, not often consider, but something we should consider as an effect of climate change. Then within the realm of climate change is what they call uninsurable assets. And whereas Jamaica has not yet reached that point, in Australia we see that more than 50% of their homes are deemed uninsurable because of what they called actions of the sea. In fact, it is projected that 1 in 24 homes and businesses will be uninsurable in Australia by 2030. But let us come closer to the North and South America, because the passage of Hurricane Milton in the United States has given more energy to the discussion about whether some states or parts of some states in the United States are uninsurable. What is to prevent that from happening to Jamaica, given our climatic history, given the fact that we are ranked second in the world in terms of disaster? So what then do we do? Because as a small island developing state with a fragile economy that relies considerably on tourism, there must be a response. And for us in the opposition, we make two quick proposals. One is that we have to start by seeing insurance not just as a response to climate change, but as a way to build climate resilience. And in doing that, we have to be creative. We have to be creative and undertake creative insurance. For example, we can offer discounts on insurance. So if you have climate resilience, such as you have installed hurricane shutters or you have hurricane straps on your homes, then that is one way in which you can get a discount. And it's a win-win. It's a win-win because, one, it protects your homes and your buildings against Category 4 and 5 hurricanes, but it also means that you are building climate resilient and there's less call on the insurance company in the event of a hurricane. A second proposal that I want to share with you, and it's not new, is what we call, Minister, parametric insurance, and you'll be very familiar with this. Parametric insurance, by its very nature, operates differently from insurance as we know it. Because what it does is that it is pinned to the occurrence of a particular event meeting a threshold. For example, rainfall over certain inches. And we saw this just recently with the passage of Hurricane Beryl, where Jamaica was able to benefit from $2.5 billion under the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility. But the challenge with this is that this operates at the state level. And for us in the opposition, as we contemplate creative insurance, then we perhaps need to widen and deepen parametric insurance so that it becomes available to businesses and that it becomes available to individuals who want to operate it. UTEC, I am charging you with commencing the investigation and the research into how an insurance such as parametric insurance can be utilized amongst the length and breadth of Jamaicans to ensure that we do not face the uninsurable crisis which is likely to occur because of climate change. And as we contemplate what the scientists call the multi-hazard environment created by climate change, including the insurance crisis, I want to just make some closing remarks. One is that we need modern, fit-for-purpose physical planning and buildings. We have to consider the type of structures that we are putting up. We have to consider how they are being built. What is the proposed use of the land? What is the historical and the present use of the land? We also need to look at the location of the building. And but equally important, whether there is sufficient drainage and runoff systems. Because, ladies and gentlemen, make no joke, if you do not take away anything that I'm saying, I wanted to take away this phrase, which is that we need good planning. We need good planning because bad planning compounds climate change. Let me repeat it another way. Climate change compounds bad planning. And secondly, we have to look at sea level rise as one of the effects of climate change and the issue of setback. Theresa, you will agree with me that we have to plant more mangroves and that we also have to strengthen our coral reefs, which are critical to reducing the impact of our shoreline. And for us in the opposition, we have committed that every policy, every development plan we have must be grounded in an environmental study. How will it affect the environment? Because the fact is that you can't want to build schools without considering how climate change is going to affect school and how climate change is affecting our children who are in schools. You can't plan to build hospitals without considering how climate change will affect it, whether it is the ventilation or whether it is how climate change is affecting the health of our nation. And we cannot, absolutely cannot, plan any development, including roads, without taking a further look at the type of materials that we are using. We have to look at where the roads are being built and how they will be impacted by climate change. And for us, we have to take a multi-sectoral partnership approach. We have to bring the society along with us. We have to work with the private sector. We have got to make the issue of climate change a bread and butter issue. As policymakers, it is our responsibility to take the conversation of climate change to the marketplace, to the community center, to the street side, so that people can understand how climate change affects their daily lives, how it affects their health, their education, and their livelihood. That is how we begin to change the culture and build a culture of climate resilience. And we have committed that in doing that, we will ratify the Escazú Agreement, which talks about making persons have a right of information that is accessible and information that is readily available. We also have to ensure that persons are consulted on matters of the environment and that there's timely access to justice. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, our response to climate change must be grounded in research and development. We must harness the best technology to chart this path. Because, ladies and gentlemen, it can't be business as usual. Because nature has changed, and so must we. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. We heard the passion, and I don't often hear a focus on insurance when we go to climate change conferences, and I think really that's very important. And in this University of Technology, with its STEM focus, with a faculty of the built environment, urban planning, it sounds like you're a planner. And we heard the challenge not just to urban planners, because bad planning compounds climate change, and you said it the other way around too. There are some very passionate urban planners here, and we hear your challenge to us and the call for decisions that are grounded in research, empirical evidence. That's what we do as a university, and we hear you loud and clear, and we'll replay it to our students, to our academics, and not just to persons within the built environment, because it's everybody's problem. Thank you so much for your impassioned appeal to us to make a difference, and not just as it relates to insurance, but climate change is affecting all of us. Thank you so much. Going to invite now to the podium the Director of the Office of Environment and Health from the USAID Jamaica, Ms. Jennifer Baldwin. Please welcome her.
Thank you very much. I will be brief because UTech kindly invited Ambassador Perry, and I am not he. I yield my time to my Jamaican colleagues. Thanks for inviting me today. Yes, I'm Jennifer Baldwin, Director of the Office of Environment and Health at United States Agency for International Development, based here in Kingston at the US Embassy. For those who don't know, that is probably the largest contributor from the US government towards climate change action here in Jamaica. Obviously, climate change is a global crisis. Here in Jamaica, back in the United States, we are seeing sea level rise, heat waves, droughts, floods, and increasingly strong and frequent hurricanes, as we recently saw with Hurricane Beryl here and Helene and Milton back at home. The United States remains steadfast in its commitment to partner with Jamaica and the Caribbean region to build resilience in the face of growing threats of climate change and mitigate climate change where it makes sense for Caribbean countries. Our close partnership continues through the United States-Caribbean Partnership to address the climate crisis, known as the PAC 2030 Initiative, which was originally launched by Vice President Harris and Caribbean counterparts in 2022. We recognize that the Caribbean is on the front lines of climate change and has unique and evolving challenges. Here in Jamaica, USAID Jamaica is actively working to realize the vision outlined in PAC 2030 by providing support on energy resilience, climate change policy and finance, and disaster risk reduction and response in Jamaica. One of our flagship projects under this initiative was the United States Strengthening Energy Sector Resilience Project. It was a public-private partnership that jointly, with USAID and private sector funding, facilitated 30 Jamaican businesses to invest in solar energy and battery energy storage systems to increase their energy resilience. We have additional ongoing work to support the government of Jamaica's ambitious commitment to generate 50% of its power from renewable sources by 2050, including support to advance the public renewable energy procurements that are ongoing, research on rooftop solar potential for Jamaica, and research on land available for renewable energy projects here. USAID is also providing support to the government of Jamaica to advance its climate change policy and finance ambitions, including support to the Development Bank of Jamaica's structuring of the $500 million blue-green finance facility. We're also finalizing new programs I can't wait to tell you about soon, related to climate change adaptation and resilience building. So stay tuned for more information. Lastly, we will always be a friend to those in need, which is why we provided $2.5 million after Hurricane Beryl here in Jamaica. We provide additional support on disaster preparedness and disaster risk reduction, such as some research we undertook on critical facilities during disasters, houses, schools, hospitals, fire and police stations, looking at their potential to adopt renewable energy and solar, battery backup systems to increase their resilience during power outages such as those caused by severe storms. Climate change disproportionately impacts people living in poverty and those who are marginalized, who are our core clients at USAID. It also affects the development progress that we have supported in Jamaica for more than 60 years. I thank all of you working hard to advance climate change, adaptation, and mitigation here. And the United States remains a willing partner to help Jamaica achieve its really ambitious climate goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baldwin. We do appreciate the USAID and its contribution to helping our nation to build resilience. I'm going to open for a couple questions. So if you have questions for any of our panelists, I'm going to ask you to use one of those mics. So we do have mics in the front here. Just maybe 3 questions. Any questions from the audience? And there are persons online or technical team at the back. If there's any question from any of the persons who have joined us online, please let me know. Do we have a question for any of the presenters? Yes? Dr. Newsom? A question from Mrs. Kadeen Stewart.
Good morning. So we spoke about the matter of insurance, but I think my concern is even before that, because the truth is that the majority of homes remain uninsured. So before we can even get to all of what we have discussed, how can we move to the low level of insurance to a more acceptable level of insurance?
Thank you so much for that question. And you are correct that we have a number of homes that are not insured. But let us start from the positive. The positive is that majority of our homeowners with more, well, of the 60% or more of persons who own homes, those are insured because it is mandatory. So you have to insure those. So we start with that positive. We also have to recognize that we are coming from a culture where insurance is not part and parcel of who we are as a people. I spoke earlier about the need to educate and to partner with civil society so they see climate change as a bread and butter issue. In my mind, what will have to happen is we have to have a cultural change that commences through education and engagement. Once we let people understand the importance of insurance and how insurance can help, as well as providing affordable insurance, then I think people will be able to be a part of the process. But I will be the first to tell you that as it is, before 2021, when the rate started, insurance was just high, and by itself is a deterrent. So the 2 proposals, which are not exhaustive, that I have made, are intended to make insurance more affordable. I have a caveat that I'm not an economist. So in terms of the dollars and cents, I can't tell what it translates to. But what I do know is good economy. And good economics tells you that if you can build a house that has hurricane shutters, that has straps, then it means, therefore, that when a hurricane comes, then your house is more likely to be protected. And I think that is the kind of conversation we have to start, and we have to bring people along with us, as well as working with the different sectors, the government, the private sector, international organizations, and other states, other SIDS country, to ensure that we provide affordable insurance. And I think that is where the parametric insurance comes in, because there's a room for the deepening and the widening of insurance, such as parametric insurance.
Thank you, Senator. Another.
So
Sorry.
Just one element as it relates to general insurance, which is what the housing insurance that you use. Pre-2018, for about the last 20 years previous, you had a minimum capital requirement for your general insurance industry, which was 250% of the insured value, which pushed premiums particularly high. So in many ways, we corrected the regulatory issues that led to the financial crisis in the 90s by going too far the opposite direction with the regulatory environment. So it pushed the cost of insurance way beyond the average homeowner, the average business owner. That insurance rate has come down now in line with the Canadian market in terms of the minimum capital tests that we require for the market, down to 150%. So that has facilitated, the last time I checked, close to 40% increase on a low base of increase in property insurance in the space. If you look at the increase, a large part of it is also based on the increase in mortgages having been issued. So we have to address the issues that I know Sophia is particularly passionate about in land and planning, etc., to increase home ownership that's tied to mortgages, because the mortgage rate does spread the insurance burden a little differently than the general insurance industry can afford to without an attached mortgage to it. So I think those are the two things to consider. That one, the regulatory environment has made it cheaper, despite the cost of reinsurance going up through the roof because of the minimum capital test coming down. But that increasing in home ownership in formally well-planned communities that are financed by mortgages will also significantly increase that space.
Okay, a question from Professor Archer, and then one from Mrs. Unami Gordon, and then you, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My question is for the two lawmakers. While you spoke of the impact and what we need to do, I want to know what will be done by both of you in terms of ensuring that we have the building code regulations passed. Because the truth is, we would have done extensive work. We have the Building Act, but there's no regulation to ensure that we build to code, and it has been languishing now. So I want to put the two lawmakers on the spot to hear what it is that they will be doing to ensure that we have regulations for the Building Act. Thank you.
So my understanding with the drafting is that they should be before the Parliament sometime early next year in terms of where those regulations are. I think if we're to admit, Sophia, for the last 18 or so, maybe 24 years, regulations coming to the Parliament has been much slower than the rest of legislation, and there's no good excuse for it, but I think this is a critical set of regulations that does need to come, but it is making its final round of circulation, I understand, for comment to come before the Parliament soon.
Thank you for that question, Prof. Regrettably, as the opposition, we are limited in what we can do. The most we can do, which we have done on several occasions, is to just call for this to be done post-haste, and we'll continue to do that. The other thing as well is, we have to get the civil society along with us by applying the pressure, because the truth is, pressure bursts pipe. And when we have civil society speaking about it and pressuring the government and the opposition to prioritize this regulation, then I believe that will add some flame to us and force us to do it. But certainly from the aspect of the opposition, we will continue to make our call and advocate for the passage.
Thank you for those responses. I did say 3 questions. We are now at number 4. Matthew, you had the mic before and I didn't notice. And then Ms. Gordon, and then Mr. Johnson is the last one. Thank you.
All right. Morning, everyone. Just a quick question, Samuda specifically, Mr. Samuda. So at the Appropriations Committee meeting, probably about 2 weeks ago, Prof. Taylor had spoken, Professor from UA had spoken specifically about tourism. As you know, it's our second in terms of GDP. I know that there is a new arrival terminal coming in Montego Bay, and I know there are plans for the airport in Negril, I believe. I know yesterday, Prime Minister Holness had spoken about driving up past the Mobe corridor and the roads and the planning going into that, but particularly around that infrastructure and the look around tourism, if there's anything that you can speak on based on the plans around that and how climate change is impacting, because he did say that a few more degrees increase would lead to probably about a 13% reduction in arrivals. And as you know, as I said, it's second largest contributor to GDP.
So that's an incredibly loaded question that I'm not sure how to answer or articulate in a very succinct manner. But Jamaica is at significant risk for sea level rise and all that comes with that. Jamaica has sold sun, sand, sea, and another S for the better part of the last 50 years. It's our brand persona. If the sea comes in and removes the sand and removes your coastline, then you have a brand promise that doesn't deliver, which is a marketing crisis for those in tourism. So there is no doubt that a few more degrees is outside of the ability for our current tourism product to adapt. There is no nice way to put it, but it's not limited to your current tourism product. A few more degrees of temperature rise changes the shape of the island. You don't have Port Maria, you don't have Rocky Point, you don't have sections of Portmore. It's as catastrophic as the Hollywood movies position it, and there isn't, if one recalls the work done on the coastal revetment in Raytown, where the road was raised, where a kilometer of the coastline was reinforced, proper drainage put in place, seawalls put in place, and has held well despite storm surges, although not fully tested yet. And you contemplate that we need 28 kilometers of that along the Kingston coast to de-risk investments that already happened, not to make your productive sector or manufacturing sector along Spanish Town Road or downtown grow, just to make sure that it's protected for your current risk. And you contemplate that each kilometer is $10 million US. And each kilometer triggers no new economic activity beyond the construction exercise, because it's not a widening of the road, it's just a shoring up of the coastline. You understand the scale of the problem. Now, if you contemplate how our tourism product is literally littered along the coastline, there isn't a singular engineering solution that's going to bring about the sort of coastal protection that you need for 33,000 rooms scattered from Port Maria to West End, Negril, with a few on the south coast. So you have a critical issue. The next thing that comes in, which is fair criticism, just targeted incorrectly geographically, is what of the nature-based solutions in that space. The largest area of degradation of your mangrove cover, etc., that provides you the sort of protection that will deal with some sea rise, not 2 and 3 and 4 degree temperature, induced sea rise. Your largest area of degradation on your mangroves is not on the north coast where you have development, because that's not where you have majority of your mangrove cover. It's in the south coast where you don't have a very active tourist product. So you have limited options available to you. So what that means is we have to fight like hell to ensure that persons honor their commitments under the Paris Agreement. And we are losing that war as a country, as a globe. I think anyone who would have followed the global stocktake last year would have to acknowledge that 2030 targets are not on track. In fact, some of those are out of reach at this stage with the current space. So we have a massive fight on our hands as a country, as a region, as a small island developing state, and on behalf of other we're not an LDC, but LDCs, etc., because there is a point of no return. And when you have the discussion on climate change, there has to be an acceptance that there's a point beyond your adaptive capacity. 2, 3, 4 more degrees You don't have that product. So the
It's
question is, what
generally
does
called
Jamaica
a
look like
tipping
that?
point.
Yeah, it's beyond the tipping point. It's beyond the point of inflection. It's a full change for what you are, who you are as a nation. It means losing significant parts of what Jamaica is geographically. No two ways around it.
Thank you. The last two questions. Ms. G, I don't know if you will allow Mr. Johnson since he's at the mic, but go ahead. And okay.
Do mortgages that are NHT mortgages that don't require one of the other financial institutions to be involved, are those mortgages insured?
Yes.
You're asking if NHT only mortgages required insurance? Yes.
Thank you.
Life in general, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Allow me to sit down. Thank you, Senator Binns, for your highlight on the insurance. You said we want to consider insurance, I'm sure I got you right, as a way to build climate resilience. And then Mr. Samuda said that adaptation is what is important to us. So I want to ask a question. Insurance companies are private companies, are private sector companies. And you refer to incentives, to give incentives so that we can assist insurance companies. So do you think government resources, which is public resources, should be used to incentivize the private sector to participate in climate solutions?
Okay, I don't, if that is what you got from what I was saying, let me rephrase it. Because the incentive that I mentioned as one of the solution was incentive that would be offered by the private entities, not the government. So I don't want to call it a name, but private company A offers general insurance. Now, what I'm proposing is that that private company can offer discount to owners of buildings or homes for those who are resilient. So you put on your hurricane straps, you have your shutters. And this is not unusual, you know, because when you look at, for example, your motor vehicle insurance, every year when you don't have an accident, you have your no claim. And you benefit from the discount until you reach a certain point where you really just can't afford to give you any more discount because the car is probably too old, or there's a minimum that they do not want to go below. So it's not a whole new phenomenon. But what we're saying is the private companies now need to understand that there is something at stake for them. So it is going to go beyond just making profit. It is also a conviction that they too have a social responsibility and they too have a role to play in building climate resilience. I hope I understand. Okay. I hope I explained. Yes? Okay.
So I think yes and no, but you can't quite frame it like that in this current structure of our fiscal affairs. I think you have to contemplate that good public policy de-risks and lowers the cost, because reinsurers have responded positively to Jamaica having the catastrophe bond. We got a lower rate of increase than the rest of the region because Jamaica had a catastrophe bond in place as funded by the World Bank. The reinsurers have responded very positively to Jamaica's fiscal reserves, highest ever, close to I think 5 billion, flirting around that figure up and down now as it stands in US, the highest that we've ever had. There's also, despite what's happening in Florida, because Florida's state economy is investment grade versus the rest of the several states in the US, they haven't responded as extremely as they could to reinsurance rates because of the fiscal health of the state and the fact that there is sufficient private sector and government capacity to respond to disasters. There's a role to play by actually managing your economic variables positively, and it does permeate. I don't want to use the term trickle down so that Sophia can run up and down and laugh at me with it, but allow it to spread in a particular manner. The other reality, though, is that insurance rates have to be contemplated, and I think Sophia alluded to it, and I agree with her wholeheartedly, that there have to be a little more granular assessments to insurance rates. And I support your hurricane strap assertion, etc. And especially where government de-risks an area by investing in coastal revetment, by investing in significant increases in drainage capacity, we have to get the insurance industry, which unfortunately is very small in Jamaica, to react positively to that, so that we incentivize the private sector simultaneously incentivize government investment, so that one hand keeps triggering greater development and greater investment in the space. Absolutely. But I wouldn't classify it, as dealing with it that way, although there is model for similar space where you incentivize financial inclusion. So I'm not sure it's outside of something we can do, but I wouldn't frame it like that in terms of where we are first. I'd say we have to continue along the path of building in that sort of macro resilience, and then taking it on an industry by industry basis, much as you had approached the JSIF discussion, to deal with it in a greatest risk first. I think that would be the approach.
Thank you very much. I did say the last question. I see somebody who is quite eager, and she looks like a student, which is the only reason I would allow her to ask a question. Are you a student?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Good.
Okay, thank you. So good morning again, everyone. So my question is for Senator Fraser-Binns. Okay, so on the topic of insurance, do you envision any major challenges for those already living in vulnerable communities or locations, such as within very close proximity to river channels or the coastlines, to be able to acquire insurance policies in light of the increased importance that's obviously being placed on home insurance?
Let me say this. Insurance is already causing people to make a decision about where they live. So I put it out there. Secondly, as a government, and when I say government, in government and opposition now, in true term government, we are going to have to lead from the front. One of the things that we're going to really have to do is to consider and truly enforce no-build areas. We're going to have to do it, eh? And I will be the first, because I'm a parliamentarian, I'm a politician, so I'm going to be the first to tell you that it is a very contentious and difficult decision. But we're going to have to decide what is it that we want to do. And make no joke, I know it is not an easy feat. Minister Samuda will tell you that in his constituency, it is something that may not be easy to resettle people. We get that. But I think as a country, we're going to have to make some decision. And that is why it is important that we have the conversation in our household, in every nook and cranny of Jamaica, because we have to bring the people along with us so that they can understand, so they can buy into the new cultural change that has to take place. If all of us collectively will survive, we're going to have to change.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, forgive me for converting your opening session into a plenary, but it really was important questions to ask and very insightful responses from our panelists, and I'm calling them panelists, right? Ms. Baldwin, and I'm ending. We have some tokens for you that Dr. Prince will present on our behalf. But Ms. Baldwin, for a question for our students' sake who are doing research on all kinds of things related to the built environment. You mentioned a research that was done on rooftop generated energy, right? How might our students, can you just briefly tell us a little bit about that study, and how might, I'm asking for the students, they access information from that study? Because I know at least one group is doing research in that area.
Sure. For sure, I can follow up after.
Yes.
With whoever that student is, I'm happy to be in touch. I'm not sure the final results were made public.
Right.
But yeah, it was pretty detailed research done by private consultancies looking at the potential for rooftop solar here and very technical assessments of impacts it might have on grid stability.
Okay,
So yeah, quite detailed.
all right.
The other study, the results are public. UE conducted a study of land area available for wind and solar in Jamaica. I believe the website for that is cater.ue.edu. Okay. So that one you can go play with that tool, which is available online, and see where it makes sense for solar projects and wind projects to explore.
Right, so that one was led by UMO now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
And just generally speaking, taking a lot of notes here in case there's anything we can help with. Happy to talk about it. Insurance, building codes, et cetera, as we move forward.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for our presenters this morning. And I'm going to invite Dr. Prince to make a presentation to the Honorable Matthew Samuda, Senator Mrs. Sophia Fraser-Binns, and Ms. Jennifer Baldwin. And they are being presented by Dr. Newville, who is the Dean of the Faculty of the Built Environment. All right, and before we close this session, we'd like to thank our sponsors. And we have 3 of those sponsors who will do brief presentations this morning. First, we will have the Jamaica Social Investment Fund, a presentation by Mr. Dwight Ricketts. Mr. Ricketts, you're here? Excellent. And then if we have a representative from JIPO, the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, and then we'll have Dr. Sean Townsend from the UDC to make brief presentations. Thank you so much. So thank you again, presenters. We'll continue the conversation, and Ms. Baldwin will follow with an email. Mr. Ricketts, may I invite you to the podium?
Yes.
This is the JSIF presentation for the technical team.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. There has been some talk regarding adaptation, and we have responded to the call. And this presentation will also highlight a response also. On behalf of the board, management, and staff of JSIF, we are pleased to be here. And who is JSIF? We have been around from 1996, primarily mobilizing funding for underserved within the communities. And we are an institution which is pleased to indicate and advise that we are ISO certified. And one of the big things which we always please to share is that we are non-partisan. Strong participation with the stakeholders in which we engage, and we consider that to be a part of our niche and how do we do business within the space. Thanks to GCF, we are here. We are pleased to share with you that we are the first accredited entity in Jamaica with the JSIF. Now, that accreditation allows us, or gained effect in August this year, and now open the doors for actual access to some funding. We have been, that accreditation put us in the category of small, which allows us to have projects of 50 million and less. The accreditation allows for project management and on granting of funds. And the benefits are clearly one which we can be proud of in terms of having access to funds which can benefit the entire country. We currently have one project which is GCF readiness, which is $500,000 US, which allows us to build capacity within the space. And we have several other projects which we are working on, and we consider them to be in the pipeline. I'll go through them quickly. Click up. Can you change for me? Having a bit of challenge. Yeah, so the first one, can go back to the next. No, it's not working. Yeah, so the first one, proposed cost of 30 million US, a grant. GCF, we are looking at $25 million funding from them and co-financing of 5 million. You jump in. Go back to number 1. And that will primarily target the agricultural sector. And we're looking at interventions in terms of greenhouses, drip irrigation, water storage, agro-processing, etc. Next project. It's working now? Good. 50 million targeting education sector. And I just want to say that we're looking at retrofitting of school roofs, windows, doors, something which is not a norm, but we're also looking at whether or not we can have classrooms having ACs or improve ventilation using solar systems. So responding to the increase in temperatures and having a conducive temperature for learning, it's something which we have to consider. The reality is that a lot of our school buildings have very low roofs or ceilings, and how do we make that space more conducive for learning? Next, we health sector, 50 million, looking at also water harvesting, looking at backup systems, installation of water coolers, responding to the whole energy need within the sector, having them more resilient in terms of when to respond to the challenges which we face. Tourism sector, not to be left out, $30 million. Looking at natural-based solution, ecosystems, looking at training capacity within the sector, solid waste as a response, and building capacity within the sector there. Number 5, infrastructure, respond in terms of water catchment, climate, proofing of roads. Minister spoke about the intervention downtown. We were the implementers for that, the $1 billion project. And as the minister indicated, it's about 10 million US to respond to that. So under this project or this category, we would have similar interventions. 50 million, energy sector, installation of on-grid systems for within the system, energy efficiency, lighting, installation of solar street lights, and also building capacity within the sector. We have been in this space, and we have some past interventions which we are pleased of. We have provided solar solutions for agro-processing in St. Mary, and also solar solutions for a pumping station in Manchester. So this is actually reducing their costs to produce water. They responding to the vulnerability of disaster. We have constructed the fire station in Montego Bay along with Port Maria and Yallas, looking at first responders and having that more hardy. Onato Bay, St. Mary. This is typically the scene we are seeing along the coastline of Jamaica, erosion. Recently, we were able to respond, beach nourishment, and doing some work within that space. It is not, it's only a drop within that space there, and we actually need additional funding to actually carry it closer to the town, those who are familiar with the space there. So, but it's a start, and it's something which we will continue to do, and with access to these funds, we'll be able to do more within the country. Drain within St. Catherine, actually Maitan Gully Drain, which takes you out of the town of Olaba towards Kingston, and we're able to provide a bridge solution within that space to allow for thoroughfare even when there's high rainfall and high precipitation, flooding. So that's a building solution for that environment. I don't have the picture of the bridge before, but at least we have a wider bridge there, also have space for pedestrians to cross, which we didn't, that wasn't a feature of the initial bridge. So ladies and gentlemen, we're pleased to be here. We have a booth outside, and we can offer more information, and we want to wish you all the best for the remaining of the conference.
Thank you, Mr. Ricketts, and for the work of the Jamaica Social Investment Fund. I invite Ms. Chantal English. She's the Deputy Director and the Legal Counsel at JIPO, to do her 5-minute presentation. You need
Good morning, everyone. I adopt the protocol that was previously established by Professor Garfield Young this morning. I am Chantal English, as was said before, and I represent the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. Now, Jamaica Intellectual Property Office is an agency of the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, and we are responsible for the administration of all laws, all IP laws in Jamaica. We are pleased and very happy to be a silver sponsor in this International Climate Change Conference organized by the University of Technology, Jamaica, Faculty of Built Environment. One of our main mandates at the Intellectual Property Office is the registration of trademarks, designs, patents, geographical indications, and the voluntary deposit of copyright and related rights. And I'm sure that many persons, all persons in this room, who have created some work. If you have done research, can you raise your hand? Excellent. You have perhaps a company, you may raise your hand. Great, excellent. And so that's one of the reasons why we're here this morning, to encourage everyone to protect your intellectual property. So yes, you have created your work, but there is an entity, an agency in Jamaica who is responsible to ensure that your intellectual property rights is protected. And we urge everyone to be cautious and take necessary precaution and to visit JIPO and deposit and to register your intellectual property, your trademark. I often say intellectual property is everywhere. In this room, you will see IP. This very podium is a design. The chair that you're sitting in, that is intellectual property. That is also design. The speech I have before me, that is protected by copyright. Trademarks, if you look around the room, the logo I have on that you are seeing JIPO, that is trademark. PIOJ, I see you in the building, you have your logo on, that is trademark. UDC, I'm sure you have a logo somewhere outside that is trademark. So everywhere around you, intellectual property is present. We cannot live or breathe without intellectual property. From the very moment you wake in the morning and you get out of your bed, you are interacting with intellectual property. When you turn the light switch on, that is patent. When you go to the bathroom to brush your teeth, that is also patent. The toothbrush, the toothpaste. So IP is everywhere, and so you can't go around it. And so in this very robust discussion on climate change, we also encourage everyone to protect the work that you are doing. JIPO also engage in public education campaign, so we do presentations for private and public sectors, as well as institutions. So if the University of Technology wants to invite us to your classrooms, we will be willing and ready to come and to do presentations on IP so that persons are more aware of how to protect and to safeguard your work. Just a little bit more about JIPO, we are also ISO certified, and we are the 4th leading intellectual property office in the Caribbean and Latin America, and we are #1 in the English-speaking Caribbean. We support the theme, adaptation and mitigation strategies for climate change departure, managing the crisis. In implementing mitigation strategies, JIPO urge all inventors, business owners, creatives to contact our office and to protect your intellectual property. Protect your business names and logos. Protect your designs. Protect your innovation. Deposit your research papers and articles on climate change. JIPO is ready and available to guide you in protecting your intellectual property. We have a booth outside. If you want more information, please visit us. And remember, protect your... Excellent. Good listeners. Thank you.
And our final sponsor in this session, Dr. Sean Townsend from the UDC. I wanted to challenge the minister about this, the third S he said people come to Jamaica for, but it seemed like Dr. Newsom knows. I have no clue.
Yes. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'm first and foremost like to thank the organizers for inviting us and giving us the privilege of sponsoring this international conference. Now, it is my pleasure and my challenge to share with you the work that the UDC has been doing over the last 56 years of its existence. How do I? Oops. Right. Over the last 56 years of its coming into existence through an act of parliament in 1968. Now, the act allows us to be able to carry out and to plan, design, and implement urban centers around the country. And the way in which we are able to do this is through a mechanism of establishing designated areas. So some of the places that you might be familiar with in which we have been instrumental in developing is like, for instance, the Ocho Rios town, the town of Montego Bay, Falmouth, Hellshire, we have been instrumental in developing that space as well, Negril, Montego Bay, and the list goes on. Now, the legacy of the UDC involves transformational projects, which have included the transformation of the, the Kingston waterfront. Nothing is happening. All right, a little too fast, but all right. So an additional transformational project is the transformation of the Montego Bay waterfront. The picture in the 70s, you can see what it used to look like. This is the largest land reclamation project that the government of Jamaica has undertaken. And we have now improved it and increased its resilience by building out and rehabilitating the groins in the area. I'll get into a little more later on. All right, so the UDC is involved in more than just urban centers and the creation of urban centers. We have been instrumental in developing many housing solutions, and there are many housing schemes and solutions that have existed across Jamaica, such as Manly Meadows, etc. Most of you will know that we are responsible for the highlight of the year, or the beginning of the year, which is the Kingston Waterfront Fireworks Show, and that whole experience in the downtown area to invite people to come and not only experience the fireworks, but also see how downtown is changing and interact with the businesses and community that is there. This is an activity that takes place right throughout the day. We have created many cultural centers, many infrastructure necessary for the development of our urban spaces. In addition to that, we're also involved in tourism, and many of you know the world-famous Dunn's River Falls. That is one of our premier attractions. We also have the Green Grotto Cave, which is probably the only Green Globe Platinum certified attraction in Jamaica. We are owners and managers of that space. In addition to that, we carry out conservation activities. So we are the owners of the Helsha Hills, which is the last remaining habitat for the Jamaican iguana. So we are very instrumental in partnering with a lot of stakeholders in the conservation of our endemic species, such as the Jamaican boa, the coney, the iguana. And so we are working with our partners to collaborate to increase the population, because the iguana is classified as being critically endangered. And we want to be able to create an experience where Jamaicans can see and interact and appreciate what is uniquely ours. All right? Now, in terms of, that's our legacy. So in terms of what are we doing now? So we have in the process of creating urban green spaces. Recently, we completed the Harmony Beach Park in Montego Bay, which is the largest public bathing beach in Jamaica. This is free to the public. It was an endeavor that that is the result of extensive planning that worked in tandem with the environment. You're not gonna find trees that were wrought there. The design was done to incorporate the trees that are in the space and work around it. So, and in doing so, we have increased the resilience by the enhancement of the groins and creating a space not only for social relaxation for your mental health, but also giving opportunities for commercial activities. Right now, we are in the process of building the Portmore Resilience Park, obviously in Portmore. And that, again, is taking the lessons learned from the Harmony Beach Park, implementing it in an urban space, and creating solutions that will improve our resilience. And resilience, we're talking about not only urban resilience, we're also talking about our social resilience. So, having a space where you're able to recuperate, having a space where you can be able to relax, your mental fortitude can be improved. So some of the features of the Portmore Park, I was alluding to this earlier when we talk about the development of the Harmony Beach Park. So that was not only just the coastal resilience that was also improved, but we also look at the social and the commercial infrastructure as well, and putting things appropriately to be able to adapt and put us in a position to be able to deal with the consequences of climate change. Now, for the Resilience Park, now we have certain features within the Resilience Park, such as the car park would also include solar energy, so we have a solar canopy. We are in discussion with JPS of putting charging stations. The buildings will utilize rain harvesting as well as solar solutions to offset, so it's a part of our energy conservation program. There is a jogging track, so when I talk about the mental health and the resilience of you as people, we are also this is a comprehensive program, because it also includes the educational aspect and about changing the behavioral patterns of Jamaicans to understand what is resilience and what is important, as well as to understand that it doesn't always look the same in everywhere that you go. So it's beyond just planting trees and greening the space when we talk about resilience. And next on the agenda, we're in the process of developing the downtown area and creating Jamaica's first linear park. So we're calling this the Harbor Walk. Now this will span from the downtown area going to about Harborview, going about allowing us a Malakon for persons to be able to walk and enjoy that space. We're in discussion with partners in terms of the design and conceptualizing this. Ideas that have been brought to the table have been things such as floating solar panels to allow with energy conservation. We are looking at utilizing the wave energy as part of the energy conservation program, looking at ideas for improving our water conservation and our resilience there, because we know about the droughts, we know about what has been happening in Kingston, as well as making the place more hospitable for business as well as your social relaxation. So this is just a brief synopsis of what we've been doing over the 56 years and what we plan to do. So there are exciting times presently and exciting times ahead. So we hope that this also demonstrates that the research is going into implementation. All right, so this is things that are always changing. We're always integrating new ideas into what we do. So this is, the UDC is able to demonstrate going from the data collection, the conceptualization and design and implementation to improve the resilience in our country. So right now, I will invite you to come and view our booth outside, and you can get further information. Feel free to visit all of our attractions all across the island, as well as look forward to our next phase of activities, which we are using the tagline, Going Green, Building Resilience. Thank you.
All right, don't sit yet, Mr. UDC. I'm going to invite Dr. Prince to make presentations to Dr. Sean Townsend, since you're standing by the banner, please, for your silver sponsorship from the UDC, followed by, I'll just reverse it, the JIPO representative, Ms. Chantal English, followed by our first presenter from the sponsors group, Mr. Dwight Ricketts from the Jamaica Social Investment Fund. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll now move into our plenary session. And then following the plenary session, Mr. Conference Chairman, Dr. Newsom.